I'm Mike Schachter, the president of the Carolina Nature Coalition, and I want to thank a few people and organizations. I want to thank Public Radio East for publicizing it. I want to thank the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in New Bern for providing this wonderful venue here. I want to thank Tom Shoup, who is our CNC secretary and also our technical guru. And I want to thank Connie Casey, our director of external communications, and the brownie baker. I also want to thank the National Weather Service in Newport for giving us a fantastic tour of their weather station. We had the tour. It was fantastic. All right. And I want to thank everybody here and everybody on Zoom. If you like what we do, please donate. Either here, there's a donation jar, or on our website, because we only get funding from you. We don't get any grants. Now, I met Eric Hayden over a year ago, and we tried to, several times to get together and have a presentation. So I'm very excited that we finally succeeded. Eric Hayden is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Morehead City, well, actually Newport, which covers eastern North Carolina, including the Outer Banks. In this position, he is the liaison between the National Weather Service and the community. All right. Working closely with emergency managers, television broadcasters, and the general public. Eric has been in the National Weather Service for 16 years, working previously at local weather service offices in Binghamton, New York, and Wilmington, North Carolina. Prior to his career with the Weather Service, Eric was a broadcast meteorologist for 5 years at various cities in upstate New York. Eric received his degree in meteorology from SUNY Oswego in upstate New York. I know that because I'm originally from New York. I can say all these things. Eric and his wife, Rebecca, reside in Cape Carteret, North Carolina, and have 3 kids. Outside of weather and family life, Eric is an avid rose grower and competes in rose shows and even has his own YouTube channel for growing roses. Also, I found out that he is a thespian. Oh my. Playing the part in a local production of Fiddler on the Roof. So I give you Eric Hayden and his company, Morgan.
That's quite the introduction. I should preface the Fiddler on the Roof part. I had not done anything since 5th grade, but my 3 kids and my wife convinced me to do it. It's Elysian Players down toward Morehead City. And for Fiddler, you need large families and you need representation from the whole community. So they needed a lot of papas. So that's how I got involved in that. And if you had seen me about 3 weeks ago, I had a full beard and the hair was going kind of crazy, but I've been trimmed up since then because we're all done with the show. Really appreciate you joining us this evening. I appreciate the group having us. I know we have folks from outside the group as well. We are recording this presentation for YouTube. So if you have to duck out, if I went too fast at any part, if a neighbor could not attend, share this information with them. It'll be NWS Morehead City. You're lucky you won't just hear me blabbing the whole time. We have Miss Lauren from Duke Energy. She's going to talk about some issues we have after the storms and some resources they provide as an organization. So we are in the middle of hurricane season. We're not quite to the peak. Don't let our guard down. I know it hasn't been a super busy year yet. We certainly had Tropical Storm Debbie. But after tonight, we want you to do one thing to get prepared. Those things that you've put off. You know you should probably have that case of water, the canned goods that you keep thinking about doing. We want you to take that step tomorrow this weekend to actually accomplish that. Focus on the impacts if we do have a storm. Never, ever focus on just the category of the storm. That's probably the biggest misconception. A lot of us focus on what is the category rating. It's part of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. And last but not least, water is what kills people. It is not wind or other factors that can occur in the storm. So please focus on all aspects. Hurricane outlook takes one storm to make a difference. And if we could maybe switch, you got my lovely face. There we go. So as I was saying, we really don't want people to focus on just the category of the storm. We want you to focus on all impacts. The other thing, this hurricane outlook gets a lot of notoriety. It's important. It's an accurate forecast. This year it's been updated early August, a 90% chance above normal year. They could all stay out in the ocean and it would be an accurate forecast, or we could have multiple storms this fall. Until we can tell you whether they're going to hit us or not, this forecast doesn't have a lot of utility. It only takes one storm to make a difference. Next year, I could say it's the wimpiest hurricane season on record. As a scientist, Morgan and I could be right. We get just one storm all of next year. But if it's a Florence and it hits us, it's a big deal. So we really stress each and every year you should be prepared no matter what the forecast says. One of the single best resources you can look at locally is our National Weather Service website. A show of hands, how many are familiar with this site? Not talking weather.com or AccuWeather, so a fair amount of people. For those that are not familiar with it, you can scan the QR code. Mr. Morgan can go around at some point. If you have any questions afterwards, we'll show you what that means. Or you can just use the website weather.gov/Newport. If you just remember weather.gov, that's used anywhere in the country. You go on vacation this summer to Alaska, weather.gov, click on the part of the state you're interested in. You'll get a forecast from Juneau or Anchorage, just depending on where you are. And our joke with that, if it's the weather you love, it's weather.gov. So that allows you to remember what it is. But honestly, it is $4 per person to fund us each year. We're part of the federal government. We fall under the Department of Commerce and NOAA. So anytime you see Channel 12 or NCT, any of your local news, the Weather Channel showing a radar, showing a satellite, and in a lot of cases forecasts, that information is coming from us, not me, not just Morgan, us. We all pay taxes in this room. So this is your information. So please use the local website. Forecast, warnings, radar information, also briefings on the tropics, really, really good information. If you just want one spot to bookmark tonight, this is your resource. Another good website, what you can get from our page, so again, you don't need to write all of these down, is the Hurricane Center. They're part of the Weather Service. If you want to bookmark it separately, it's hurricanes with an s.gov. Really good information on this page, including forecast, storm names, storm surge information, and a bunch of things. But one thing I want to highlight is the tropical weather outlook. How many of you are familiar with this or have kind of seen this before? So pretty up group on what we do. It varies. This is something you also may see through the local news. It doesn't just have to be from our website. 4 times a day, the Hurricane Center will outlook where there is a potential risk over the next 7 days for something to form. And we'll color it yellow for a low chance, orange for a medium chance, and red for a high chance. And if there's happens to be a storm out there, we'll put that on there as well. This is what you should look at each day, 30 seconds. Either watch the local news or get it from our website. Do I need to be especially concerned in the next 7 days? If not, you move on with life. You don't have to check this every minute, but it's something I would kind of encourage you to check out. Just a little special update for you. Nothing too imminent, but this is our official one from this afternoon. The one prior I showed you was hey, this is what it looks like if it gets kind of crazy. This is today, this afternoon. The next 7 days, we have about a 20% chance for something forming in that yellow hatched area. It's not a track, doesn't tell us if it's going to hit Eastern North Carolina, doesn't give us any more information than, I should probably start paying attention a little bit more over the next 7 days. That would still probably be another 7 days out from our area, but it's a little reminder that we should start paying attention to what's going on out in the tropics. Yes.
You mentioned, the various websites that National Weather Service has. the weather.com, the Weather Channel, they're gonna hype things up. All these media outlets, they get their information from these guys.
So it will come for us, and to the gentleman's point, I get paid the same tonight. I had a nice dinner at Morgan's downtown. I love talking to you, especially when there's not a storm. I get paid the same today as I do during Florence. So it doesn't benefit me to hype anything up, and we're going to talk about that in the social media part. We will hype it up when we think we're especially concerned with your lives in the community, and I'll talk about that for social media. One of the most prominent things on the Hurricane Center website is this tracking map. You should be familiar with this. Again, you may get it many different resources. Most people show the official track. Don't look at what we call the spaghetti models. Has anybody seen that? It looks like Morgan and I were in kindergarten and we drew all these crazy tracks. It drives me crazy because it is useful information if you know how it's used. When they're all spread out, going every which way, we're not confident. Those are all possible scenarios. And what good does that do you? If one hits North Carolina and everything else is going all over the place, does you no good. They're only useful when they're kind of tightly clustered and showing the same area. I wouldn't waste my worry on that. We will give you plenty of heads up. When there's an official track, this is what you should be paying attention to. With that said, there is some misconceptions about this graphic. This shows you the most probable path for the center of the storm. And last time I checked, when Michael read that bio, it was beautiful. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a meteorologist. However, that was written very specifically. Probable path of the center of the storm. That does not show you who will be impacted and who won't. It doesn't show you how much rain you're going to get. What's the storm surge? It only shows where that little dot on the map is going to go. And we know, for those that have been in the room for a long time, that wherever the hurricane hits, there's impacts felt hundreds of miles away. Hurricane's not a dot on the map. So this is not an in or out scenario. This is not a, I'm in it, I need to be concerned. It's going to Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, I don't have to worry about it anymore. No, no, no. It's drawn based on statistical error. So it's not drawn really wide because it's a wide storm. It has nothing to do with the current storm in terms of the width. The other thing, as Florence approached, we were not in the path, the cone map of the storm here in New Bern. It's because we accurately predicted the center was not going to hit here in New Bern. It's going to hit down toward Wrightsville Beach. So again, that if you're in or out of it, no. If it's anywhere near you from Florida through Delaware, you should be paying attention. So it's useful, but please don't just focus on if you're in the path or not. A little more useful is the graphic on the left-hand side. This is time of arrival of winds. You'll notice the probability of who's going to see the strong winds. That's a little more useful map because there's bright colors where we're most confident where the strong winds will be, and then those lighter greens where it's probably less likely to occur. These graphics are on the Hurricane Center site. If you choose to evacuate, if you board up your home, if you want to complete your plans, that's your graphic. When do I have to get everything done? This will be a reasonable arrival time of the tropical storm force winds. So in the bio, it mentioned I'm a big gardener. So while everybody was preparing for Florence, I was pretty prepared. So I was cutting my roses down, and I knew I had until a certain time to be done because I was in town for work. On the lower right, I'm going to really hone in on this because of where you live. Storm surge map and what the height of the storm surge will be, because that's what we need to talk about since we're here today or this evening in New Bern. To the gentleman's point in the back, there is not a lack of information prior to a storm. In fact, 2 weeks out, I'm sure you're hearing about stuff. Do not waste your time or energy on anything that's not official. It's not because we get every single thing right or every aspect of the storm right. It's because we're very consistent with how we message. We're messaging it this way, and when things change, we slowly shift that way. We're not here and there and here and there. We're very direct with how we message. A good way to stay on top of it, in addition to our website, is social media. If you just search NWS or National Weather Service, Morehead City, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, X, as they call it now, YouTube, we're all on there. So a lot of good information. And I challenge you, if you're on social media, you're going to see stuff floating out there. Unless it's from the Hurricane Center or a trusted local source or us, you should not be sharing it. You have a lot of power in this room by what you share. If you share good information, that spreads good information to the community. And this goes through everything in life. If you share stuff that's not true, that's not good for the community. To that point, the tweet in the upper left is one I did on the morning of Florence. We got calls from people wanting to come back to the area because instead of it being a 4, it was now just a 1. And I used the word catastrophic. Our impacts with storm surge and rain have not changed. Again, I don't get any benefit out of doing that. I see your faces. I remember you from the talks. I care about you. That's why I use the word catastrophic. We don't just float words around. When we use something like that, we really mean business. And we do that via social media. So that first little part is how you get information. Recap, weather.gov, click on Eastern North Carolina. I really encourage you to save that site or be familiar with our social media channels, and you'll be well ahead of anything that's going to come our way. The next part of the presentation is going to talk about how you can prepare. If you wrote down our website, you are good to go. All you need to add is a /hurricane-prep, or you can scan the QR code. And if you're a slow writer, you're okay too, because the next 4 slides are going to have the same website at the top. So hurricane preparedness, anything you need is on this page. How to make your kit, insurance tips. Hey, you should have lots of cash on hand. You should make sure your gas tank is full. Anything you can think of is on this website. Graphics in Spanish, videos for the deaf and hard of hearing. We continue to try to put more information on this website. So it's a one-stop shop. This is a beautiful evening out right now. I know it's getting a little hotter. Our stress level is pretty low, unless you have kids going back to school. I've got 3 that just started yesterday. So, but you know, things are pretty stress less at this point of the year. If we have a storm on the horizon, your stress level is going to increase. Think about life when you've had to make some tough decisions. If you had time to plan, you had time to breathe and think about it, you probably made a pretty good decision. Those times that you had to react really quickly, sometimes you made good decisions, sometimes you did not make good decisions. Planning is key tonight when nothing's going on. So try to prepare today, tomorrow, this weekend while it's still quiet. And it's really a 3-step process. People like to jump to the kit and they want to jump to evacuation. All very important, but it starts at your home. Who is in your home? Who are you responsible for? What is your vulnerability? So vulnerability is weather. Do you live in a low-lying area? Did you have flooding in Florence? Do you live along the Trent River, Neuse River, any area that's susceptible to flooding? Do you know that you've had issues? Do you know your elevation? I forgot to add this to this presentation, but if you Google NC flood maps, again, NC for North Carolina flood maps, there's a program called Feynman in North Carolina. It's you can see gauges, but it's very useful to show the 100-year floodplain, 500-year floodplain. 100-year flood means a 1 in 100 chance any year. A 1 in 500 or a 500-year flood is a 1 in 500 chance any year. It's not a, oh, I had the 100, I don't need to worry about it for my lifetime. Just like our lottery tickets, we could buy 2 scratch-offs and win in a row, and then the next 20, we're losers with it. So that education, you know, you're much more vulnerable if you're in a 100-year floodplain, less vulnerable in a 500, but it still could happen. And if you're near those areas, you are at risk. Just because you're not in that floodplain doesn't mean that the mapping can't be off by a little bit. So NC flood maps is very useful if you're new to the area, you're trying to determine what my vulnerability is. And if you really want to get experience, knowing your elevation, Mr. Morgan and I, that's a conversation after this that we can help you. But if you use Google Earth or on your phone, there's various ways. If you know your elevation and you're at 25 feet, in a lot of cases, you're going to be okay. If you're at 5 feet or 7 feet, then we need to have a conversation that you are more vulnerable. Gravity always wins, and so does elevation. So the higher you are, the better. That's all weather. We're meteorologists. Your risk includes more than weather. Who lives with you? I've got 3 young kids that are not so young anymore, 16, 13, and 10. So my family leaves. So my vulnerability, that's who I need to be concerned with. I grew up in Maryland, even though we talked about going into school in New York State. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. My mom lives in Swansboro now. So my vulnerability is higher because I get to evacuate 2 families now instead of just 1. My mom's almost 80. That's a whole nother thing I need to concern myself with. Young kids, pets. If I lose electricity, I'm uncomfortable. But as of now, I do not need electricity to survive. If you have somebody in the home that needs oxygen, they're on dialysis, they have a CPAP, anything that needs electricity, that's a consideration. That's things you should be thinking about. So think about who lives in your home for vulnerability. Based on that is how you make your kit. At least 3 days of everything you need to be completely on your own. No Walgreens trips, no CVS trips, Harris Teeter, Food Lion. I'm with the government, so I can't favor anybody. So I'm mentioning all of them. Piggly Wiggly, your best store, Lidl. You're not just going to be able to go out to the store just like that. So bare minimum, food, water, medicine, non-perishable goods. But notice I didn't just mention food. You need contact lenses. If you're getting low on that, make sure you're stocked up. Your prescriptions, if they're getting toward the end, get them refilled. Anything you need to be on your own, at least 3 days. If you can stretch it out to 7 days, that is what we would suggest. It's not that you, it might be because you can't get to the store, but it might be that the store is not ready for you. Power's been out, they need to restock. The trucks can't get in with the food, trucks can't get in with the fuel. It's not a scare tactic, it's the reality. Up to a week is kind of common in some areas. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 days, sometimes it's 10. Just depends on how the storm hits. I understand that not all of us can just go out this weekend and get everything, and that's why we're talking about it today. So spread it out. Pick what is most needed in your house. If it's bottled water, get that first, and then next weekend get the canned goods. If you spread it out, it's like installment payments. It's going to spread out the pain of finances, and it's going to ensure that you get it done. So please spread it out. Supplies will run out. Contrary to popular belief, we do not own stock in bread or milk or any of the things that everybody runs out to get, but it is going to run out. I just went to Walmart the other day and my son was remarking, gosh, they have a lot of water. Are they stocking up for hurricane season? I said, probably, but I said, look at how much they have. There's plenty of water to go around right now. I promise you, if we get a storm in the next couple weeks, that will be depleted, just the way it goes. So what's your vulnerability? Have a kit, 3 days minimum, 7 if you can. And last step is please have a plan to evacuate. How many of you that were here in Florence chose to evacuate? So a decent amount. How many of those that did not evacuate wish they had done so? Maybe some were happy they stay. All right. So down our way, I still people will still come up to me saying they wish they had. It's a personal decision. Depends on where you live, your vulnerability. You got a generator, you're up high, and you don't have anybody else in your home, then maybe you stay. It's up to you. But even if you would never ever leave, I want you to have at least 1 or 2 places to go. So when the storm is upon us and it's worse than you've ever seen, and you need to make that last second decision on where to go, you don't have to research it. You know where to go. And we try to say at least 2 places. It's not, it's not just Raleigh, it's not just Kinston or Goldsboro. Sometimes those places are worse than we are. Just depends on where the storm goes. So I like to say a northern and southern route. So my plan A used to be Baltimore, Maryland. That's off the table with family moving. So plan B for us is South Carolina. It could be the mountains. It's just completely opposite of where the storm is. It just depends on where you're going. Sometimes going to Raleigh is perfectly fine. If it's with Hurricane Fran and Floyd, even Florence, they had it bad too. So just because you're inland doesn't mean you're safe. Try to have a plan to go somewhere else. A lot of folks that say, I will never, ever leave, in the back of their mind, they say, I'm just going to go to a shelter as a last resort. That is a safe place, and that is a possible option. It is not a comfortable option. It's a safe place. It's a cot with a lot of other people in a gym. You will be safe, but it's not like a hotel room. A better option would be, raise your hand if you have family visiting often. New Bern is awesome. You have relatives visit, right? They're coming down to your home. Go visit them. Go return the favor. It would be much more comfortable to visit them than at a shelter. A shelter is a safe place, but that is really the last resort that you want to be. You want to be at a hotel, family friend, somewhere out of town if you choose to evacuate. The reason why I'm stressing this, and I know some of you did not leave in Florence, we get the most frequent, we have the most frequency of storms in the entire country. Eastern North Carolina is the most frequently impacted stretch of coastline in the entire country. Again, Eastern North Carolina, most frequently impacted the whole country. This graph shows return period on average where we see a hurricane, and we're roughly 5 to 7 years. That's a little lower than what they are down in the southeast part of Florida. So most frequently impacted stretch of coastline. We stick out with the Outer Banks. We're close to the Gulf Stream. We can get storms that come up our coast, or they can cross Florida and come out of the Gulf of Mexico. We can get them many, many different ways. So if you were not aware, yes, we get a lot of storms where we live. And you may have heard names like this that make you, old timers or experienced folks will talk about this. The 1913 storm was kind of a benchmark for flooding in New Bern. Then that was eclipsed in 1933. And then from a literature I've read, Ione, which I don't have on here, in 55 was a little higher than that, and Florence was probably a little higher than that. So when you went through Florence, for some of you, and say that's a once in a lifetime storm, maybe not, because we had it with Ione. We had storms in the 30s in 1913. So that was not a one-time thing. It was probably one of the highest surges we've had, but we've had comparable ones at least 4 times, in the last century. So a lot of storms in our area. And these are some pictures. This is downtown. This is New Bern, Johnson Street with the 1913 hurricane. My point of emphasis is not to scare you. It's just to show you reality. When you see pictures of our community, I want to go back more than Florence. I want to go back more than Irene, just to give you history, because history will repeat itself. Maybe not this summer, maybe not next summer, but at some point we're going to see another storm similar to that. The time to prepare is now. We are near the peak of the season. This graphic shows right here, as we get into August, especially September, that peak goes way up. This is frequency of hurricanes and tropical storms. We've had storms as early as May, so really at any point during the summer we can be hit. But they have lasted well into the month of October. Hurricane Matthew in 2016 was in October. So the peak is September 10th, after Labor Day. The kids are already back in school. We are not even halfway. Who's ready for NFL football? Anybody? So a few people. We're not even at halftime. We're not even at halftime with the football season or hurricane season. So we have a long way to go. So don't let your guard down. Season is long. There's some messaging challenges. We've gotten more accurate with the forecast. Back when Hugo hit, we would maybe issue warnings from Florida all the way up through the coastline of North Carolina. Now we're much more specific, but we're still losing lives. We're still having challenges in our community, specifically with the category. I'm not going to leave unless it's a 2 or 3 or 4. Too much focus on the category. And just remind yourself, we've had a lot of 1s. For those that raised their hand that have been here for a while, you remember Irene was a 1. Florence was just a 1. Even Hermine, or last fall with Ophelia, those were just tropical storms. So almost $200 billion in damage and 200 deaths between 2010 and 2020. And that's the hotel right on the Neuse River, or I think that's on the Trent. I get them confused, but that is a boat up into the side of a hotel. That's downtown New Bern in Florence. So for those that were not here in Florence, this shows you some of the magnitude of the water that was in our community off the Neuse and Trent rivers. Water is traditionally what kills. 85% of people that die, it's water related. That could be surge, it could be flooding, it could be rip currents. This is New Bern. This is our downtown in Florence. That's out east on Highway 55 during Irene in 2011. That's Bridgeton Fairfield Harbor. That garage that's dented in, that's not somebody driving bad, that's the force of the water. And you can see all the junk in their driveway. That's storm surge debris. So water is what kills. So it's not to say that wind can't knock a tree down and fall on your car or house. Certainly can knock out power, but water traditionally is what does it. 11 of our 15 deaths in Florence were flooding. All 11 were in vehicles. Again, all 11 were in vehicles. Water can come up quick here along the Neuse because of surge, but traditionally it's people driving through flooded roads where that happens. Past experience is a good thing, but not all storms are alike. They're never the same. Just because you were okay in Irene and Florence doesn't mean the next one you'll be okay. And also the flip side, just because you had it bad in Florence, maybe it won't be as bad next time. Every storm is unique. Just like we have different personalities, so do the storms. How big, how small, how quick? Does it hit at high tide or low tide? Did you have 10 inches of rain last week? Each one is unique how it forms and hits our area. So sometimes people let their guard down. That's Ione I mentioned in 55. Prior to Florence, it looked to be about a 10 or 11 foot storm surge. That's what we had during Florence. So it was just a little lower than that. And like Miss Lauren and I were chatting earlier, that's what the level of the water is. That doesn't take into account the breaking waves on top of it. So I love basketball. Basketball hoops about 10 feet high. That's higher than the height of a basketball hoop. Pretty bad stuff. And then Irene was a bad storm here in 2011. This is a loop. Floyd, everybody knows that's the eye of the hurricane. But the reason why I'm pointing this out, notice the bright colored tops of the clouds, the brighter colors. That indicates showers and thunderstorms. We're going to let this loop through again. But I just want you to realize how large these storms are. Everybody wants to know, where's the eye? Where is it going to hit? What's the category? It's important, but all the way down here off the coast of Florida, we're starting to see the fringe impacts of Floyd. Hours and hours and hours and days sometimes. And finally, the eye gets up here. A lot of times that's just halfway through the storm. So if I convey anything to you about not focusing on the category, the other one is too much focus on exact landfall. Obviously, it's important. If it stays out to sea, we don't have to worry about it as much. If we're on the right side of the storm, it's worse. So it's important, but just don't let your guard down and just focus on landfall, category, things like that. There's just so much and so many hours and days they can impact our community. After the storm is important as well. How many of you own generators? So a decent amount. We lose people to carbon monoxide poisoning every year, generators in garages or enclosed spaces. So know how to use your generator. Make sure it's well ventilated and outside. People falling off of ladders, electrocutions, there's down lines in the community. The water is nasty. You don't need to be traipsing through it. So if you decide to stay home, stay inside. There's power lines down, the water, there's septic in our community. It's not something you want to be in. And we have lost people because of that. If you have any wounds or cuts on you, we've lost people due to infection. If you're not usually doing yard work, you don't need to be the first yard cleaned up. Let that younger neighbor help. Take your time. Heart attacks, carbon monoxide poisoning, electrocution, all things that have happened. In fact, 50% of our deaths now are after the storm. Part of that is because we're doing more of these talks, and a lot of you are prepared prior to it. You have your kit, you've left the area, you don't drive through a flooded road. Now we just got to make sure we see it all the way to the glove and all the way home. So that's how we're going to end, and then we're going to turn it over to Miss Lauren to talk a little bit about what Duke does in the community. I want you to focus on these 5 things, not the category. You don't need a meteorology degree. You can watch Donnie on Channel 12 or Jerry on NCT or who's the younger guy, Zach Holder, ITN. You can watch any of those folks. They'll tell you this. We'll tell you this. You'll have this information. Just don't pay attention to the category itself. The 5 things are rainfall flooding, storm surge, rip currents, wind, and tornadoes. And we're going to start with probably one of the biggest issues where we stand. It's kind of a tie between rainfall and storm surge. But I put storm surge as the #1 risk where I stand today because how quick that water can come up for the Neuse. If you ever look at the Neuse River, it's like an arrowhead. It's real narrow at the one end and it gets wider down toward Havelock. The Pamlico Sound is extremely shallow. If we get a northeast wind, east wind, any easterly component, it can push it up the Neuse River and our water rises. We don't typically see rainfall flooding down where we are. They do in Kinston and upriver, places like that. But that water can back up via storm surge and can cause tremendous water level rises. I mentioned about 10 to 11 feet downtown New Bern along the Trent and Neuse Rivers during Florence. That's an image of a house. You can see the water is extremely powerful. You've probably seen pictures along the beach where it can just clear structures away. Very, very strong. And that last bullet, a storm does not have to make landfall in our area to cause an issue. Florence hit in Wrightsville Beach, an hour and a half away, and we had really bad flooding. And again, wave action can add more damage on top. So we're forecasting 10 feet. You can add a couple of feet to that based on the waves. I'm going to go through a series of graphics. These are worst case scenarios. These are reasonable worst case scenarios. And I'm gonna, I know you probably can't see the towns on there, but I can, and I'll point them out with a laser pointer. But what I want you to visualize is this is a category 3. This is a Fran. We've had some in the 50s. Like we don't get a ton of 3s, but this is not some the realm possibility. This is a reasonable worst case. We could even have a 4, but this is like, hey, a 3 is not out of the realm of possibilities. And as you look at this map, the blue is less than 3, but as you get into the yellow, it's more than 3, the orange more than 6, and the red greater than 9 feet above ground level. And I'll use my cursor to point out. Yeah, that does show up pretty well. The reason why I showed this zoomed out one, and I know you can't see the cities, but this is New Bern as I'm hovering. This is the Neuse River. This is the Trent River. So this is River Bend and all the way up to Trenton. So any of these little low areas or little creeks off of the Trent River, the water goes backwards. So as the surge comes up, and it's a smaller tributary. So it's like you take a hose, when you squeeze it, the velocity of the water increases. The same thing as that water goes up the smaller creeks and rivers, it just has nowhere to go but up. So that water goes backwards. The second thing, the water usually drains down to those areas, but if they're at a certain level, they back up. So it's that combination of the surge coming back up the rivers and then not allowing the water to run off really causes an issue. And I started wide because I want to show you, if you live in River Bend, not picking on folks there, or even Trent Woods or any of these areas, if I was new to the area and I'm 45 minutes from the beach, I would probably think I'm pretty safe. Even though I've got water around me, yeah, I've got canals and I've got the Trent River and the Neuse River. I know there's water around me. I'm not surprised by that, but I would probably be surprised to hear that I can get storm surge 50 minutes inland from the coast. So that's why I'm re-emphasizing. This is zoomed in. Again, this is River Bend. A lot of these areas are marshy and they're not developed. So it's not everybody, but there are houses in these developments. Trent Woods, this is Bryce's Creek toward the airport. Here's the airport here. So again, greater than 3 feet is yellow, but you can see some oranges and reds at 6 to 9 feet above dry ground. So your question?
Well, I'm trying to see, like, did you go into Trent Woods from New Bern, right there on McCarthy and Chelsea?
Yes.
Where is that?
Let's see. Ahmad is familiar. So you said Trent Woods. Yes, here's Trent Woods, and then the New Bern's up here. Here's the here's 17 right here. So probably in here somewhere. It just depends what your elevation is. They're designed. I can give you the link after. This is public access. If you Google storm surge maps, you can all look at this. By design, when you zoom into street level, it will kind of disappear. But if you go back and forth, you can tell where you are. But looking at your elevation is super important. If you're just a few feet or less than 10, you could have some issues. So they'd probably be okay. But and then I'll kind of move the map east. This is downtown New Bern. We have some high points. That would be where the blue is. But then obviously along the waterfront, north side of the city, it is low. It might not seem like it, but it is. And then here's the Bridgeton area across the river. And then right on the edge, I was able to sneak Fairfield Harbor in there as well. They had some pretty impacts in Florence. So none of this is to scare you. It's just to show you the reality. Because again, if I just moved here, obviously I could see the water out there, but I would not think the water could be 10 feet high from storm surge off the Pamlico Sound. It's just hard to wrap my head around. But again, just it has happened before. And again, just imagine that water's really high. Those creeks can't drain, so then everything gets backed up. That's one of the reasons they flood bad back to Pollexville. It is rainfall flooding there as well, but it's a combination of the surge and the rainfall. The surge actually goes all the way back to Kinston, not to the level that we have it here in New Bern, but in terms of the water backing up. So pretty big deal is storm surge. So that we picked that as number 1. Number 2 in our area would be flash flooding. We don't have the topography they do just inland toward like Snow Hill or Greenville, but we have an urban area here in New Bern. Anything paved is not going to soak in the water as much. So that is New Bern. This is credit ABC 11 out of Raleigh. We will issue flash flood warnings for those. The message with that is it only takes about 2 feet to float a car. So all the people you see driving through the water do not want to do that. Most of our deaths occur in vehicles, and it's nothing to do with category. Again, Florence was a 1. We had 20 to 30 inches of rain. We could have Tropical Storm Morgan, and if it's 30 inches of rain, you know it's going to be a big deal. So flooding can occur with any excessive amount of rainfall. We always show this picture to drive home the point. This is near Hookerton. This is up in Snow Hill. Water is extremely powerful. Again, up to 18 inches, 24 inches, carry your car away. What you don't realize is this: does the road even exist? How deep is the water? You might say, well, Mr. Eric, I would never drive through that. Well, you don't know that is under the water, especially driving at night. So turn around, don't drown. Easy message to remember. The take home point for you is you decide to stay, stay. You decided to evacuate, stay away. It can take a while to get back. Do not be in a rush. Don't drive around barricaded roads, things of that nature can be really, detrimental to your life. We do have river flooding. Like I said, the Neuse River down in our area is more storm surge, but just upstream in Kinston, Highway 70 can get closed if it gets above about 25 feet. So getting around our area can be a challenge for many days, sometimes weeks. We're at the end of the rivers, and they start in the mountains, they come down toward the coast. So those rivers remain elevated for quite some time. And that's one take home point I want you to remember about evacuation. I don't tell you to evacuate or not, but it's not just about where you are. You've got your generator, you're at 20 feet. I'm never going to leave. I live in a great spot. You're probably okay where you live, but you might be an island. So if you have a medical issue, they're not going to just get in an ambulance and come get you. They might have to get a boat to come get you. So your 911 response may be non-existent if it's in the height of the storm. They're not responding if the winds are really strong, or it may be delayed. So does that kind of make sense? I mean, you might have everything, you might be good to go, but it's the community around you might not be in good shape. Things are not going to be the same in terms of response. Rounding home, rip currents are another danger in storms. Well before storm, well after storm, it creates swell. As the storm takes shape in the ocean, it generates large waves that come crashing on our shores. Unfortunately, a couple weekends ago with Ernesto, it was toward Bermuda. We lost a young person in Surf City. We lost 4 people at our beaches in 2019 with Lorenzo. It's 2,000 miles away. We didn't lose anybody with Dorian. All the flooding on Ocracoke, didn't lose anybody. Sunny weekend day in October, we lost 4 people. You don't hear the thunder, you don't see lightning. So the thing to remember with that is rip currents pull you away. They do not pull you under. So if you swim left or right or parallel, they're very narrow. You can easily get out of them. Try to swim at a lifeguarded beach. Now we're getting past that season. They're not as protected. So they will still have the flag system. Respect that. If it's a red flag day, you shouldn't be in the water. They're nothing to be afraid of, but you do need to know how to get out of them. The biggest issue is people fight them and then they come in to trouble. One more point before I talk about the wind. You're going to want to save your grandkids, your kids, somebody that's in the water. Instead of going in after them, a lot of people that die are those that respond. Direct them where to go. Instead of going in after them, say, go this way or go that way. And this seems like a pretty advanced group. The next level step is, I was just with my kids. When they're always at the beach, they always end up one way down the shore or down the other way. Whatever that way is, that's the way they should go for a rip current. So we say left or right just for simplicity, because it will work. They'll eventually get out of it. But if this is the rip current and all day they've been carried down this way, it's much easier if they went that way to get out of the rip current, if that makes sense. We say left or right, so it's quick, easy. But if you know which way the current is going that day, you should go with it. Second to last is wind. How many remember Arthur in 2014? A couple. How many of you remember Irene? So if you weren't looking around, more people raised their hand for Irene than Arthur. Arthur was a category 2. Irene was a 1. Are you sure you got that right? You didn't flip-flop that? You remember Irene more? It's a trick question. They hit at the same spot around Cape Lookout. Arthur was a compact 2, fast-moving. Irene was large, slower moving, just a category 1. Re-emphasizing it's not all about category. Do I pay attention to it? Yes. Was I scared when Florence was a 4? Yes. But it's only part of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. So look at all the impacts. Last but not least, tornadoes. We had a lot of tornado warnings. We lost somebody up toward Raleigh with an EF3. We had an EF2 in our area. That's pretty strong on the tornado scale. It's rotating already. So whether it's a hurricane or tropical storm, we will probably get tornadoes. They can occur and often occur the first bands of rain that come on shore. If you decide to stay, that's fine. Just make sure this is powered up. It's not turned on do not disturb. Have a NOAA weather radio that will work when the power goes out. be paying attention. You're probably not out shopping, but at the snap of the fingers, you may have to quickly seek shelter from one of these spin-up tornadoes. And unfortunately, they can produce more damage than the storm itself. Dorian was a good example. Most of us ho-hum with wind, but tell that to some spots in Emerald Isle that had an EF2 tornado. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Lauren, but as we transition, what can you do now? Share this information. We couldn't all be here tonight, so share this with folks via the YouTube link or through the coalition, the beautiful Zoom link that they're going to share. Do something tomorrow, this weekend for your hurricane kit. Don't make your decisions just based on the category, and do not forget about after the storm. I will mention a program. It's called Weather Ready Nation Ambassadors. I would love for the coalition to sign up. It's free. It's again in my price range. It's for anybody to participate in. Got to be an organization. We have hospitals, schools, HOAs. It's a way that we give information out to the community. So whether you need brochures or talks, we're just encouraging people to sign up. In the old weather service, we would have you come to us. Now we're waving our hands and saying, hey, we really could use help getting out to the community. So we've got some paper forms up front. You can certainly fill that out, or you can scan the QR code there, and we can chat at the end. That is my email if you have questions. I'll take a couple questions, and I want to transition to Miss Lauren, who's going to come up and talk a little bit from Duke Energy. But at this time, do I have any questions from the audience before we transition? Yes.
The people on Zoom won't be able to hear you unless
I use that.
I give you this.
All right.
Questions?
I was going to say, there should be a number 6, which is duration. And just the cat is a nice number, but it should be an O-ship sign. How slow is moving?
Yes. So the question, do I need to do that one, Michael, for the Zoom audience? No? Oh, there we go. They can, I gotcha. And then so for our virtual audience through ours, the question was, we definitely need to talk about duration 100%. That, in addition to how much rain and what the surge is going to be, duration is huge. Like we saw with Florence, 3 or 4 days of rain and wind is a much bigger deal than 12 hours. Just like it's a big deal if we had a storm last week. There's so many variables, but you're 100% right. Duration is a huge issue. Debbie wasn't a huge storm, but for some of our community, we had over a foot of rain because it was such a long-lived storm. So duration is a huge part as well. We tried to stress that prior. Thought we did a better job with Debbie than we did Florence because of Florence. The very first one-page slide we sent out actually talked about this is going to be a long-lived storm. So you're 100% right. Duration is a big key. Anything else?
Is sea level rise going to affect storm surge?
It will, in terms of if your water's already starting off higher, then you're going to have more issues. So it does come into play, but more week to week and month to month factors also come into play. How are the tides? Are they one of those higher than normal tides that we get throughout the year or not? So those are other factors as well. Lots of factors.
Another place to go to if you really want to learn more about how tropical storms are formed and what their makeup is go to Jetstream Online School for Weather by NOAA. It was put together by the Southern Regional Headquarters of NOAA.
Jetstream is a gentleman in the audience had mentioned Jetstream. If you Google it, it's through the NOAA website, the Weather Service. Many topics. You can be your own meteorologist learning through Jetstream. A lot of good educational information, not just students, but if you're a weather enthusiast, Jetstream is a great website. Appreciate that. So I don't see anything else. So we're going to transition. I'm going to close out of mine, and we're going to transition to Miss Lauren, and she's from Duke Energy. It's got some stuff to share with for you. Okay, is that okay? Okay.
Well, I'm really excited to be with all of you today, and Eric is a wonderful resource for this community. I've been with him at a couple of these talks here in Eastern North Carolina, and there's no one that really does it better than you, I have to say. But I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Lauren Wargo. I'm the Government and Community Relations Manager with Duke Energy. I cover an 11-county district here in Eastern North Carolina. And I actually live here in New Bern, which is great. It makes me excited to be with you today. I know a lot of you probably aren't Duke Energy customers. You might be City of New Bern customers. So I want to keep the information I give you today fairly general. Our highest priority at Duke Energy is safety, and that includes your safety. So just a reminder, when you guys see down power lines after storms, it is so important that you stay away from the power lines, keep kids and pets away from power lines as well, and report those down lines to an emergency management number and the electric provider, whether it be Duke Energy or the City of New Bern. I think that probably covers everybody in this room for the most part. So after your safety, our safety is also important, the safety of our line workers. And a lot of times that means that when there are outages associated with weather, we might not be out immediately to restore your power. So you have to be prepared to last through the storm and after the storm, depending on the duration of the event. Our line workers stop getting up in their bucket trucks when winds are sustained about 35 miles an hour, and that's for their safety. There are a lot of things that you can do to help us during a hurricane, and one of the things is reporting your outages. City of New Bern has an outage reporting line, and Duke Energy does as well. If you're a Duke Energy customer, I've got some handouts that you can take with you that show the ways that you can report those outages, either by text message, website, or phone. So Duke Energy is doing a lot of things on the front end to prevent outages before a storm hits. And a couple of those things involve bringing the power grid to what we call a coastal standard. And that's bringing our poles closer together, which means they're more stable, they can hold the lines up better, especially if a tree falls, there'll be less damage. Another thing we're doing is replacing susceptible wooden poles with steel poles, especially in some of the swampy areas. I don't know if any of you have Duke Energy back by Hunter's Ridge. That's an area that's just prone to outages. It's the end of the line, it's a long span, but we're doing what we can to build resilience in those areas, provide backfeed and AI self-healing technology for our power system when it's in a grid pattern. After Florence, we had several floods, substations flooded here in eastern North Carolina, and since Florence, all those substations have had flood walls installed around them. And these are 8 to 10 foot high structures that are permanent structures. And before a hurricane or flooding event approaches eastern North Carolina, we'll go in and put that final piece in, seal it off, make sure the pumps are working. And it takes our crews about a week to do that. So we're always watching what our meteorologists are saying, and the National Weather Service is a huge asset as well that they definitely take into account. But I'm really happy to be here with you today. I've been here once before and really enjoyed the community. So I'll turn it back to Eric, and I'm happy to take questions if you guys have any. Yeah.
I am from the Pacific.
I do have questions. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest. We moved down here to North Carolina. What a lot of people sound energy is doing right now, they are replacing their lines on poles and putting them underground because the Northwest is susceptible to hurricane force winds. In all essence, they aren't hurricanes; they're just cold mid-latitude cyclones up there. And so we have some really strong winds up there that do knock our power lines down. And in these areas that are more and more susceptible to these power lines coming down, they're beginning to put them underground. What's Duke Energy stance on that?
So a lot of the new subdivisions are choosing to put the power underground from a distribution standpoint. So you've got distribution and transmission lines. We're talking distribution here in a neighborhood. A lot of the new developers have chosen to pay the cost of putting those lines underground. We do have several programs at Duke Energy for communities to reach out and us work with them on getting those lines underground. There's a cost associated with putting the lines underground. And since the cost of doing that infrastructure work is conveyed to the customer, we have to be really careful about those programs, because I tell you, that's probably the question I get asked the most in these communities, local governments. Everybody wants their lines underground because they're less prone to outages caused by vegetation. But they are also difficult to repair occasionally, and just the expense of getting them underground when they're already above ground is an additional expense to the customer. And we're really trying to make these upgrades to provide a reliable and a resilient service to the customer while keeping it affordable. So, but we always take input, and a lot of those older communities, I know they definitely could benefit from it. I know River Bend is one of them. They've got a lot of underground lines, but the only lines above ground are going down that first main road with all the trees. So pay attention.
Questions? Actually, I have Duke Energy out in the country here.
Yeah.
And I report my outages, but I also look at the map,
Yes.
which is really good.
And just like Duke Energy, City of New Bern has an outage map. And when you do have an outage, it doesn't take long for those maps to populate to show you what the estimated restoration time is. During a non-storm event, our processes are a little bit different. So if you have an outage on a blue sky day and log into our outage site, you'll see an estimated restoration time almost immediately, because there's a crew on site quickly. They have an idea of what the problem is. But if you go onto our site during a storm event, a lot of times we don't immediately have those restoration times predicted. And that's because there might not be a team on site immediately. And we don't want to auto-generate those restoration times if we can't keep that commitment to you. So it's important to go on and track the restoration times, but I can tell you during Florence, you probably wouldn't have been happy with what you saw up there. And we just take our time to provide accurate information to the customer, and that's the most important commitment we have to you.
Does Duke Energy have a lot of hired crews, or do they, when an emergency, or do they rely on outsourcing? Because I was from Connecticut, and a big utility company scaled down their crews to save money, outsourced it only in an emergency. Let's put it this way: the state of Connecticut climbed up big time, and the public from then on had no wish to be positive to that energy company.
Yeah, and local staffing is definitely right. We're a regulated utility at Duke Energy, so we're required to have a certain number of line workers here locally. And the great news for you guys being here in New Bern is that we have an ops center right here in New Bern, which is where our line workers sit every day. So these are people that live and work in this community. And I think in a hurricane situation, a lot of times they're the unsung heroes. They're the people who have really had to prioritize evacuating their families because they know that they're not going to be able to take care of things at home, their house. These people make a lot of sacrifices for our community, and a lot of times they're on the end of frustration, I guess, because everybody wants their power restored quickly, and they really are good people. And the fact that they live and work in our community, I think, is even more important to recognize. So we have that ops center here. We do rely on contractors, especially during storm events. And there's a whole team that's coordinated throughout this region that stages contractors, brings them in. There's a system for feeding them work. And we're very thankful for their help during storms. They come from all over the country. And at Duke Energy, we do the same. We've sent crews down to Florida and Texas this year. We're all working together to restore power as quickly as possible after these events. Yeah. Thanks, Eric.